Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. Today we have another wonderfully produced video by astrologer and psychotherapist Martin Sebastian Moritz, which is part of a series looking at essential dignity from a modern perspective. If you're enjoying this content, please show Martin some support by visiting his YouTube channel, which I'll leave a link below this video in the description and the chat box, where you can find other great content in both English and German. And lastly, if you wish to view our current class, workshop and webinar offerings, please visit keplercollege.org. And without further ado, let's get into the video.
In the first episode of my series on planets in detriment and fall, I talked about the Sun in Aquarius. In this, the second episode, I will shed light on the Sun in the sign of its fall, Libra. As case studies, I have chosen the cautious ex-president Jimmy Carter and tragic and glamorous Hollywood icon Rita Hayworth. But before we look at the Libra sign with all its assets and liabilities, let's take a moment and reflect upon the general idea of the dignity rank system, which helps determine the strength or weakness of a planet's zodiac position by sign. Each planet has one or two signs in which they are dignified and one or two signs in which they are debilitated. Now, when a planet is in the sign opposite of its domicile, it is in detriment or exile. A planet is in the sign of its fall when it is opposite the sign of its exaltation, a position which is considered to be favorable. The Sun is in the sign of its domicile in Leo and in the sign of its exaltation in Aries. This means that it is in the sign of its detriment in Aquarius, opposite Leo, and fall in Libra, opposite Aries. When a planet is in fall, or a falling position, the planet may struggle to express itself on several levels, making the native with this position feel uncomfortable with the planetary expressions. When a planet is in fall, it is a bit like being in foreign land. As a foreigner, we don't know the language or customs, so as a result, we may often get lost and don't feel that we belong here. The planet may feel a drainage of energy where it cannot truly show its potentials. There is a conflict of goals between the planet and the sign. However, as astrologer Liz Simmons says, essential dignities and debilities are an awesome way to categorize the strength in expression of a planetary placement. With that being said, I also think it's a somewhat sensitive method of categorization. After all, while this is an efficient way of categorization, it can also be received in an emotionally unproductive manner. After all, while it's wonderful to be told that one has domicile or exalted placements, it can be equally difficult to hear about having exile, detriment, and fall placements. Hearing that a particular placement is considered unfavorable can be somewhat damaging to the appraisal of said placement. After all, if it's communicated that a detriment or fall placement is a weak point, then the stance on said placement will be associated with negativity. This can lead to poor appraisal of the placement, which can actually hinder potential opportunities for positive, productive growth instead. I agree, and I would also say that in order to make the most of it, a planet in detriment or fall requires rather elaborated talents to embrace the qualities of the planet in this challenged position. Sun in Aquarius means that the natives feel different and may find themselves sometimes in an aloof position, which may mean creating a distance to other people as well as to themselves. But I also think that this way of being in the world can bring joy as well as unpleasantness. It all boils down to how the natives handle their sun affairs. Again, the Sun is about finding the center of one's own identity. So, before we analyze why the Sun is in Libra in the sign of its fall, let's call to mind again what this air sign is all about. Libra, balancing and fair play. The symbol of this sign of the zodiac is the scales. They symbolize the active attempt to establish justice and to avoid extremes. With every imbalance, no matter how small, the scales strike out and try to get back into alignment. That Libras are well balanced is therefore a widespread misconception. Rather, they are constantly busy creating peace and harmony and settling disagreements. This requires flexibility, diplomacy, and a lot of patience. Like all air signs, Libras are very curious and outgoing and have many interests. The Libra can be charming and friendly and is often very much into relationships, as she seeks affirmation, stimulation, and friendship. What others think matters very much to her. However, they don't like it when someone gets too close or behaves too dramatically, because these people will then be kept at arm's length. The Libra is also able to see things from other angles and with some objective distance, and like a soothing, cool breeze, can diffuse heated situations. Like Taurus, Libra is ruled by Venus, but the effect of the goddess of love is here more aesthetic and mental than material and physical or sensual. Libras love everything that is beautiful and aesthetic and value good manners, fair play, and consideration. The Libra symbol can also be interpreted as the setting sun over the sea, because in October the days slowly become shorter and one tries to make the most of the remaining daylight hours. Therefore, Libras avoid wasting too much energy on being too intense about problems or revealing too much intimate information about oneself, because that would be too exhausting. Instead, they prefer to look for the bright, light, friendly, and superficially non-committal. Unfortunately, Libras find it hard to fully commit themselves, take a stand, and assert themselves with their own needs. When asked, "Why don't you say what you want?" Libra people react with unease and try to delegate decisions back to others or the group. A lot of precious life energy can be wasted in this process, as diplomacy and consideration are not always appreciated by others. So, the Libra sign is a nice sign and all about establishing peace and harmony, justice, and they really take into account what others think about them. This can be difficult to stick to a point of view if others disagree and if this would mean to rock the boat. They really need the approval of others and go to great lengths to get it. Now, finding a compromise and staying friendly and fair all the time can be downright exhausting, and this can also be difficult for the Sun, the luminary, which is about finding the center of one's own identity. These people can be too nice, too fair, and neglect their own needs. They may find themselves piggy in the middle and may feel pressured to seek compromises in which they don't really believe, just to keep everything smooth, even if it's only on the surface. Our first protagonist is Jimmy Carter, US President from 1977 till 1981, with the Sun in Libra in the 12th house in a square with Pluto, as we will examine later. He has gone down in history as one of the weakest presidents. However, Carter never left the world stage after his defeat against Ronald Reagan in 1980, but instead reinvented presidential retirement, founding the Carter Center, a think tank for defending human rights and finding solutions to alleviate suffering around the world. He has mediated international conflicts, monitored 96 elections in 38 countries, resolved conflicts in many nations, and helped to completely eradicate guinea worm disease, which once affected millions. In 2002, he was awarded the Nobel Prize. These are surely typical Libra issues, aren't they? To moderate and try to establish peace. He was president during a time of vast changes in the world.
He was definitely overwhelmed by the Iranian Revolution, more than a bit naive about how dangerous Ayatollah Khomeini actually was, and not able to read the writing on the wall about the threat of Islamism. He was also piggy in the middle between his aides, but there also might have been sinister goings on behind his back, as befits the sun in the 12th house. There is a new biography out there called Jimmy Carter, His Very Best, in which the author claims that in 1980 the Ronald Reagan election team sought to sabotage Jimmy Carter's re-election by persuading the fiercely anti-American Ayatollah Khomeini, the new leader of a Muslim republic, not to free the 52 American hostages until after the election, so that Reagan, in case of him winning, would take the credit for it rather than Carter.
Now, what had happened? In November 1979, at the height of riots against the US, a group of students had seized the American embassy in Tehran, holding 52 American diplomatic employees hostage for a period which was to last for a total of 444 days. Originally, the new regime had demanded that the exiled Shah, who was treated against cancer in the US, be returned to Iran and stand trial as a condition for the release of the hostages. Resisting cries to declare war, Carter maintained his commitment to negotiate the release of the hostages. But the Shah's death reduced their motivation to release the captives, and the Iranians took delight in negotiating humiliating terms for their release, only to have the Ayatollah veto any deal at the very last minute. Now, the Reagan team apparently promised to strike a much better deal than the Carter administration. Reagan would unfreeze Iranian assets and give them arms.
In April, a rescue attempt ended in failure as American helicopters sent to free the hostages crashed in the Iranian desert during a sandstorm. This meant that Carter's chances for re-election were as good as nil, because the public would blame him for this failure. And indeed, he lost the general election against Reagan in a humiliating defeat. Carter as a president was a kind of an enigma. On the one hand, extremely obliging, friendly and diplomatic. On the other hand, he had a suspicious, overly controlling side to him. After the Watergate scandal, Vietnam War and economic uncertainty, the American public longed for someone who was unspoiled and down to earth. Carter was a peanut farmer from Georgia. His slogan, "I will never lie to you," became his trademark. That a president has to assure that he wouldn't lie seems absurd, but in the post-Nixon era this felt refreshing.
But when in office, he refused to play by traditional Washington rules of trading favors and ignoring the interests of his party, which soured many Democrats and drove off many potential allies who saw him as self-righteous, a personality trait that would eventually alienate voters and lead to his defeat. Carter was a victim of the stagnant economy and high inflation that plagued every administration from the early 1970s onwards. The second oil embargo in 1979 had a disastrous impact, just as the first did in 1973, bringing rising prices, long lines at gas stations, shortages of fuel, and gas rationing. Moreover, after years of protest and activism, the disco culture of the mid to late 70s replaced the shunned hippie counterculture and resulted in a severe rejection of hippie anti-materialism, love, communal life, and spiritual enlightenment in favor of a trendy hedonism, embracing money, cocaine, and elitist lifestyles. When Carter addressed the nation's malaise in a televised speech, he was widely ridiculed, and this made him seem out of touch with the times, scolding the American people for his own political failures. Now, let's look at his chart.
As in all charts, there are contradictions. A Libra Sun with Libra Rising, we have all the usual Libra trimmings of trying to be fair, nice and charming. But with two planets in the first house in Scorpio, Saturn and Moon is also in the sign of its fall here, we have a marked Plutonian undertone here, which is echoed by the Sun-Pluto square. The Sun is also in the 12th house, typical for many politicians and actors, by the way, because this is a placement which supports the concept of hiding behind a public persona. As I said, Carter was an enigma, and the friendly, charming, non-committal side always came with a good deal of skepticism, willfulness, and a reluctance to trust others. The Sun is in Libra in its fall because, on the one hand, it has to abide to very high standards of fairness and being mindful of others, and on the other hand, a tendency to be indecisive. This can make it hard to A, find one's own standpoint, and B, to stick with it. As with the Sun in Aquarius, where the challenge was of becoming too easily aloof and distant, the Libra sign, which is also an air sign, can become too light and lack gravitas. You find yourself stuck on the seesaw. In the Carter chart, this is intertwined with the Plutonic issues of being stuck with one's own passions and reluctance to let go. An interesting dilemma, but Carter found his ball game after his presidency, becoming a broker for peace and justice, Libra, with passion, Pluto/Scorpio. Also interesting, the Leo sign is intercepted in the 10th house of career and goals. So the Sun is the co-ruler of the 10th house, Moon being the main ruler, and Venus, ruler of the 12th house, in which the Sun is placed, is in the 10th house. Add the Chiron at the cusp of the descendant, and we can trace why Carter has always been so drawn to people and nations in need. Although Libra is a young sign, it's nevertheless ruled by the goddess of love, Venus. So, let's talk about one, Rita Hayworth. As any Libra Sun, she wanted to play it fair. But her stellium with Sun, Mercury, Venus and Lilith in Libra in the 6th house, exasperated by a square with Jupiter and Pluto, repeatedly put her on a collision course with men whom she wanted to please, and in the end wore herself out of it. She had 5 marriages to men who used and abused her, who thought they were marrying a goddess, when what they were marrying was an insecure woman who just wanted to be loved and protected. She deserved so much better. Her Libra story provides a fascinating backdrop for a biography which feminist themes are as up-to-date today as they were in her time. The 1946 film noir classic Gilda is one of those special black and white gems from Hollywood's heyday that will definitely be remembered. The key scene takes place in an elegant nightclub. The camera glides onto the dance floor, the band starts playing, a cone spotlight is directed at a female figure. The following appearance of the title character Gilda makes every post-war man's heart beat faster, because Gilda is not an ordinary screen beauty, but a vamp like there never has been one before. A femme fatale who can drag a man to ruin as soon as he succumbs to her charms. The story and characters of this gangster jealousy drama are flat and woodcut-like, but that doesn't matter at all. All that sticks in your mind is Rita Hayworth as Gilda. A tall, slender figure comes into its own in the elegant, skin-tight, off-the-shoulder black evening dress made of shimmering satin, which is slit high at one leg with matching arm-length gloves. Suggesting a striptease, she takes off one of her shiny gloves with relish and throws it provocatively into the crowd. The then 27-year-old dancer/actress with Spanish roots has long been a star by this time, but it is this film that will finally catapult her into the pinnacle of fame and makes her America's love goddess,
an image that will cling to her like a curse for the rest of her life. She had starred during the war years mostly in musicals, which had also established her fame as the most sought-after pin-up girl of her time. Her photogenic face and slender body were the epitome of an all-American beauty. But to get there, she had to undergo a long and hard transformation to change from the Spanish Margarita Carmen Dolores Cancino with the unruly raven black mane, who had been working hard from childhood on as duo with her ambitious dancer father in nightclubs, to the red-haired all-American movie star Rita Hayworth. Assimilation and submission to the Hollywood star system was her only choice to become really successful. Let's be 100% clear here. She basically had to deny her quote exotic unquote heritage and become Caucasian/American. Now, the sun in a woman's chart does not only stand for her own identity, but can also stand for father figures and partners, which was certainly the case with Rita Hayworth, who was born in 1918. Her sun is in the 6th house of service work and health, and she really worked hard. She grew up being dominated by her father, Eduardo, who came from a long line of proud Spanish dancers, and dance became young Margarita's life. She had to rehearse all the time, at first together with her brothers and later with her father alone. Father and daughter appeared together as an act. While we know that the sun is in Libra in its fall, which may bring a tendency to focus too much on others and not enough on oneself, her Venus is in Libra in the sign of its domicile. When one planet is weakened by a sign and another in conjunction is in its domicile, the latter takes over the steering wheel. Given that she had Taurus rising, Venus is also the chart ruler. She certainly had that sensuous Taurus touch in her appearance, but her ascendant is the only placement in Earth. She has no planets in Earth. This might explain why she wanted to feel safe so badly. And while Venus wants to please, Black Moon Lilith tries to rock the stellium boat. On the one hand, Rita was stuck with her role of love goddess. On the other hand, she wanted to break free from the Hollywood cage. She was a shy woman and needed to be protected by strong men. But time and again, she found herself at loggerheads with these men, be it her husbands, and amongst these was eccentric Orson Welles and Playboy Prince Ali Khan, or Columbia studio boss Harry Cohn. She had to battle when all she wanted was peace and harmony. A typical Libra conflict when Lilith is on board. Very striking is Rita's yacht figure, which consists of Moon in Pisces at the apex and a quincunx with her Sun, Stellium, and Saturn in Leo. By the way, a detriment placement. Saturn in sextile with Sun accounts for Rita's discipline, but Moon in Pisces is an elusive affair, can be self-neglecting and with a marked longing to merge with another person, a feeling, an image, a sensation. Very fitting for a dancer, by the way, because music, movement, and dancer become one unit. A quincunx comes with a constant nagging feeling of being out of touch, nervous, and highly strung. Always disappointed. The yacht figure is a tense circuit, which makes the native super alert. Rita Hayworth always had the feeling that she had to sit on more than just one chair at once. Saturn in Leo alone can have a hard time finding something to be proud of, but in a yacht it accounts for a constant underlying feeling of not being good enough. For a woman who is constantly praised for her beauty and talent, the contrast to her own low self-esteem must have been enormous, creating even more pressure to please. And if you add Mars in the 7th house to the mix, you have another proof for a tendency to attract friction with men. So, while her need to please the men in her life, which had its roots in her childhood, she also wasn't one to be pushed around. She might have been more patient than other women, which is typical for the Libra sign, But her Lilith also had to call a spade and draw a line in the sand when she had enough. Saturn sextile gave her the resilience to pick up the pieces time and again, but the need to earn money for herself and her two daughters meant that she had to work. She took time off from 1947 to 1951 at the height of her career and married one of the richest men in the world, Prince Ali Khan. But living a jet-set life in Monte Carlo with a flirtatious playboy wasn't exactly a brilliant choice. She had her Hollywood comeback with 3 films and then turned her back to Tinseltown again, this time with singer Dick Haymes, a notorious gambler and alcoholic. Another comeback, this time approaching the dangerous 40. Her last time she was given top billing, even only because Frank Sinatra, who was in awe of her, insisted, and then her career slowly began to fizzle out. Her last husband, producer James Hill, whom she divorced in 1961, was even reported to hit and humiliate her in public. She also began to behave in an aggressive manner, moody and unreliable. She also found it harder and harder to memorize lines. Nobody knew then that those were the first signs of Alzheimer's disease, of which she finally died in 1987. Her daughter Jasmine Khan had taken care of her during her last years. So, that's it for the Sun. Let's wrap it up. The Sun is debilitated in 2 air signs, Aquarius and Libra, while it is strong in Leo and Aries, 2 fire signs. The fire element is all about the divine and about the consciousness that every individual is special and needs to embrace their own uniqueness, a flame which needs to burn. Air, on the other hand, is of a much cooler and less dramatic nature. Aquarius is about defining one's own identity by realizing, time and again, how different one is from others, which can inevitably lead to a feeling of detachment and distance from other people. On the other hand, the Aquarius sign is all about fraternity and equality, the idea that we humans are all the same. You might also say Leo, the sign in which the Sun is in her domicile, is about zooming inside and focus on one's self-awareness and conscious identity. Aquarius, contrary-wise, is all about zooming out. Libra is about trying to find balance, weighing different options and viewpoints against each other. The seesaw goes up and down, up and down. Every perspective demands a reaction, a contra-perspective, a sensible, undramatic argument for or against. This elaborated method, which sets itself in motion almost by default, can be draining, so that the native with Sun in Libra may run out empty and, more often than not, frustrated, because there is still no harmony, but only discourse. But then again, one can also argue that many Libra people thrive on diplomatic interaction with others. This can serve as a kind of mirror function to make them feel their own complexity and ambivalence. Left to their own devices, they can have a hard time and struggle. Also, every time when being pushed to show their true colors, they would try a whole rainbow of colors rather than just one. Okay, so when it comes to the Sun, both signs can be a bit challenging, but these signs can also give the Sun a lot of leeway to find inventive and surprising ways to play around. To all Aquarius and Libras, good for you, and keep on to wow the other 10 zodiac signs. Oh, and before I forget, the Sun is, albeit very important as one of the 2 luminaries, only one of several placements in a chart. Also, the Sun must always be evaluated by house and aspects also. A square to Pluto can taint the Libra or Aquarius Sun just as much as a conjunction with Venus and Lilith, a quincunx with Moon and sextile with Saturn. The next episodes will deal with the Moon, which has its detriment in Capricorn and its fall in Scorpio.